Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Luke Yango, and I am going to be the presenter of today's topic, which is retirement distribution planning. Now, I see a few participants are still joining the call, so I'm going to give it a few minutes before we get into the meat of today's conversation. However, I am very excited to present this topic as we've received a lot of feedback over the years in our surveys that this is a topic that a lot of people would be interested in hearing about. So here we are today. And retirement distribution planning is very unique because there are a lot of variables that go into this level of planning. And we'll be discussing a majority of those today, as well as opening it up to some questions at the end. But first, a disclosure from our compliance department. And I always like to mention anything from a tax perspective should be reviewed with a CPA. So if you have any tax related questions, always be certain to reach out to whoever you may be working with. But before we begin, let me give you a short overview of our firm for those that are not clients on the line or just don't know us. And we're a boutique wealth management and financial planning firm in Irvine, California. However, we do have clients across the entire nation. And what we do with our clients, many of which are on the line today, is we work with them on their holistic financial planning and investment management needs. We find that our industry is just too focused on just the investment side of planning. So we've made it a priority to take a comprehensive and holistic approach to planning and just to continuously educate, which is one of the reasons why we host this webinar series. Now, our process involves building a well designed financial plan, organizing our clients' investments in coordination with that plan, and then to ensure that any outside financial planning items have been handled. And if they require our assistance, we're involved. Now, here's a quick overview of our team. And within our firm, we have 7 financial planners. We have a retirement plan specialist, an investment specialist, and then 3 administrative assistants. We love the clients that we work with. We take pride in what we do. So, for those that are clients on the line, as always, thank you for placing your trust in us. But enough about us. Let's get into today's topic. And as always, I like to give you a little taste of the areas to planning that we're going to be discussing. And shown here are, uh, or is what we call the financial planning pyramid, which are the areas of planning that we focus on and work with our clients on. And for today's conversation, we'll be reviewing retirement planning, cash flow planning, organization and control, and then lastly, of course, less worry. Ultimately, a well designed retirement distribution plan, which is what we're talking about today, should assist in developing these aspects to planning, really helping to get you higher and higher on the planning pyramid to provide you the most fulfillment in your life. So, for today's agenda, we're going to be reviewing 4 things. First, a review of exactly what retirement distribution planning actually is. Second, we'll be discussing any key considerations when developing a plan for yourself. I'll review some of the most common pitfalls that I see to retirement distribution plans. I'll discuss how to build an individualized plan for yourself. The key word is individualized. And then, of course, any next steps. And hopefully, after today's conversation, you all have a better understanding of the necessary steps to building a plan for yourself that should help you as you transition into retirement or just better position your financials for the retirement that you may be in. So let's begin. What is retirement distribution planning? Well, in summary, it is the strategic and the organized way in which you liquidate assets while in retirement. And the key word, once again, strategic. In summary, a well designed plan is going to improve the longevity of your retirement assets. It'll help to maximize Social Security and your pension benefits, hopefully. It'll help to lower ongoing taxes associated with distributions. It should help provide enhanced confidence as you're in retirement and will hopefully help to lower risks while in retirement. And lastly, in my opinion, and my my opinion, the most important is just providing confidence that you can spend your money on the desired activities that you wish to do while in retirement. Ultimately, a well-designed retirement distribution plan really is just a good life plan. But even though you're not working anymore in retirement, well, most of you probably aren't, you still have bills to pay. And you have a lot of different accounts that you should be pulling from to pay those bills. So figuring out exactly how to distribute from those accounts is going to be imperative. And before you retire, it's important that you also have an idea of how much money you need to live a comfortable retirement. So you should be asking yourself some of these questions. What is your desired retirement age? How long do you expect to live? What is your desired lifestyle while in retirement? Have you paid off your home? How does your home play into retirement planning? And what access to healthcare do you have? And really, how healthy are you? These are all questions that play directly into your financial planning, but more specifically into your distribution planning. Because as we're about to talk about, there's a lot of considerations to be aware of. So let's just jump right into those. And I'll preface the section by saying I cannot tell you right here and now how to build a perfect retirement distribution plan because, as I mentioned earlier, everyone's situation is different. But what I will do is review some of the most important components of distribution planning to really just ensure that you have the information to make smart decisions related to your own situation. Now, do not be shocked by this chart. It's really just to prove a point, and that point is essentially every type of retirement asset is going to be taxed differently, and they all have different internal components to them. And what I'm showing you here are some of the most common assets people use to fund their retirement and some of the details to them. For example, let's just start off with Social Security. Is there a guarantee that you will receive income? Well, most likely, yes, there is. You're guaranteed a payment by the government. Are there taxes upon receiving Social Security? Well, yes, there are, but only partial. We're going to talk about this later. Is there an inflation adjustment to this benefit? Yes, there is. Social Security has what's called a cost of living adjustment, so your benefit typically increases every year. Is Social Security liquid? Well, not really. You really only receive your checks once a month. And what you can see by just briefly looking over this chart, we're not going to go over all of it, is that all these retirement assets have different internal components, different income possibilities, taxes, inflation adjustments, liquidity details, distribution restrictions. And while I'm showing you this is, we're going to get into this shortly, is because when you have different assets with different internal components, then you can coordinate those assets to provide the highest cash flow while in retirement, while hopefully lowering taxes as much as possible. And that's really a big part of retirement distribution planning. And once you understand the logistics of your retirement assets, then there are some questions that you should be asking yourself so that you can begin to coordinate these asset distributions for your plan. So, what should you be asking? Well, as I mentioned earlier, you should have a general idea of your time horizon while in retirement. Secondly, you need to have an idea of how much you're spending and what expenses are going to change in retirement. For example, when putting together a retirement plan for someone that is still paying off their mortgage, I'm certain to exclude their mortgage from their day-to-day expenses, as the mortgage is a very large expense that will eventually go away, and they'll no longer need to draw from their available cash to pay for it. Additionally, a mortgage is more or less like putting money in one pocket and taking it from another pocket because you're still putting equity into your home rather than going to the movies, which is just paying for something with cash. The third point is very important. Is there an age difference between you and your significant other? If so, this could affect a lot of different planning items. For example, it may change when you claim Social Security, what your long-term care planning may look like, and also this might potentially expand the time horizon for your retirement distributions. The fourth bullet point we'll discuss here in the next slide, but when should Social Security be claimed? When not properly planned for, you can potentially leave tens of thousands of dollars on the table with this benefits. So it's imperative that you put a little bit of research and a little bit of thought into your distribution. Next, how should you be managing your non-retirement investment accounts, as these accounts do have different tax implications to them? How do you protect against longevity risk, which is just the risk of outliving your portfolio? We'll talk about this as well. And then lastly, what sequence of distribution strategy should you be utilizing? These are all important questions and they should all be taken into account when building out a plan. And we're going to be talking about many of these throughout the presentation today. But one thing I'm constantly seeing is that people are not taking their Social Security benefits as serious as they should. And what I want you to understand is that Social Security is a very, very large benefit for most people. And what this graph shows here are the various break-even points for claiming ages with Social Security. And essentially, the break-even point for taking your benefit at full retirement age of 67 versus claiming it early at 62 is only age 77. So what does that mean? Well, if you think you are going to live to at least age 77, it may make a lot of sense to actually wait on withdrawing your benefits and to pull just from other assets or sources first and just hold off on your distribution of Social Security to your full retirement age, 67 for most of you. Additionally, let's just say you waited from age 67 to age 70 to withdraw. And by the way, so you're aware, 70 at least in today's day and age is the latest that you can withdraw Social Security, where you're still getting a increase each year. But anyway, if you waited to 70 versus taking at 67, the break-even point in this example would be age 81. And let's compare all these scenarios here. Let's just say you live to age 90. Then the person who claimed early would only receive, in this example, about $1 million from the system. The person that claimed at full retirement age and lived to 90 would receive about $1.3 million from the system. And the individual who claimed the latest and pulled at age 70 would have actually pulled, in this example, $1.5 million, the largest of the three, even though they were the last to withdraw. And one last thing to mention here is that each year after you claim, you get what's called a cost of living adjustment. I mentioned this earlier. And what this is a percentage of your benefit. It's not a dollar amount. So for those that wait to claim, they end up with a higher benefit and a higher cost of living adjustment because their higher benefit is, or I'm sorry, their cost of living adjustment is going to be calculated as a percentage of the higher benefit. So for, let's just say, Bob, who claimed at 62 versus Betty, who claimed at 70, each year Betty is going to most likely get a larger increase in her benefit because her benefit from the start was larger. And then lastly, one important thing to note is if you're married and one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse receives the largest of the two benefits. So if there is an age difference in your marriage and the older individual makes more money, then a lot of times it is in your best interest to have that individual wait until 70, as their benefit will most likely be passed on to the spouse. But once again, this is why I always say do a little bit of analysis, do a little bit of thinking. Don't just go out and claim your benefit. And obviously talk with your advisor in regards to this as well. So here's a quick decision tree regarding claiming. I'm not going to go into all the detail here, but it essentially summarizes what I just reviewed with you. If you believe you're going to live past age 81 and you have other assets to pull from, then waiting to withdraw your benefit usually is in your best interest. Like I said, too often I see people claim the moment they retire. But the fact of the matter is that just because you retire or you have retired doesn't necessarily mean you have to claim your benefit. You can wait, you can be strategic, and ultimately you can pull more money out of the system when you think this way. Now, I want to change gears here a little bit and switch to something similar to Social Security, but instead of the government providing you a stream of income, it's actually on you to fund. And that's what's called a life annuity. Now, annuities are extremely customizable, and there are multiple types. But for today's conversation, I want to talk about what's called a life annuity. And essentially, it can be thought of as longevity insurance. Excuse me. Just like someone purchases life insurance to protect their families from a unforeseen death, a lot of times people buy life annuities to protect themselves against the chance of outliving their retirement portfolio. So in a sense, it's insurance. And annuities do get a bad rap, mostly due to the fact that a lot of people, and I've seen it, are sold them when they're not necessarily needed. However, when implemented correctly in a plan, they do have a lot of benefits, and the main being, in my opinion, is that you can guarantee income for life. And when you have two guarantees, both from Social Security and a life annuity, cash flow may not seem as intimidating. And I should mention that a guarantee is only as strong as the company that's paying for it. So if you're not going with a reputable insurance company, you may want to rethink your plan. But secondly, what's nice about these is you can easily build annuity streams into a financial plan because you know exactly how much money you're getting from the insurance company on a monthly basis. And this is going to help provide what I call a guaranteed income floor. Additionally, many annuities do allow you to add on an inflation benefit, kind of like the COLA with Social Security. So your income goes up each year by some predetermined amount. And lastly, many annuities do allow you to kind of invest within the annuity, so you have the opportunity to take advantage of market increases while still protecting your guaranteed income. That way, if the market's doing very well, you may be able to benefit and receive a larger monthly payment. But of course, I wouldn't be doing you justice without discussing the disadvantages, as you can see on the right, which include probably the biggest disadvantage in my eyes, additional costs associated with the annuity and the lifetime income benefit. The lifetime income benefit in most annuities is what's called a rider, and riders have fees. The second thing with these types of products is that they're typically not fully liquid, meaning you can just you can't really just pull all the money out once you put it in. There are restrictions to it, and potentially, if you pull money out, you may affect your lifetime benefit payout. And lastly, there are limited investment options within these types of products. But to summarize here, annuities are just a tool to use within your planning. They're not good, they're not bad, they're a way to plan for longevity risk and may be incorporated alongside other retirement assets. And that leads me to the next slide. And what I want to discuss before moving on to the next section is kind of this hypothetical sequence of distribution example. And the reason I'm showing you this is to simply show you how varied assets can be coordinated together for retirement security. And for this example, the assumptions are as follows. A couple would like to retire at 65 and their life expectancy is 85. They have about 200,000 in cash. They have a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, and a non-retirement investment account. Jill's Social Security benefit at age 67 is 1,300, and Jack's at age 67 is 3,000. Jill's benefit is less than half of Jack's. This is very important to keep in mind. They also have about $1 million of equity in their home. So what do you think their sequence of distribution should be? Think about it for just a second. Well, first and foremost, and this is general here, this is not applicable to everyone, but for someone that's just planning for retirement longevity, in many cases, the best thing for them to do would be to reduce their cash holdings at 65 when they retire. This money isn't going to be making them anything, so it may be best to utilize it before utilizing other investment accounts. Next, Jill's benefit is less than half of Jack's Social Security benefit. So this means that she is going to claim 50% of Jack's. If you didn't know this, then it is very important for you to understand if you have a spouse who has a small benefit. So because Jill is going to be claiming half of Jack's, she actually maximizes her benefit at age 67 because spousal benefits do not grow after age 67. But note, she cannot take a spousal benefit unless Jack has also taken his benefit. Jack, however, will be claiming his benefit at age 70 because that's when it will be maxed out. In this example, that may be the ideal claiming strategy for them. Next, they will want to withdraw from their non-retirement investment accounts, probably after cash. And this is so they let their retirement accounts to continue to defer taxes into the future. So non-retirement investment accounts are usually the first to withdraw after cash. Typically, what I'd recommend here is to first withdraw from the lower appreciated securities and then set dividends and set interest to pay cash rather than to reinvest. And that way you have cash accruing in the account. So you might not have to sell as much because you're just able to build a kind of a cash reserves of the account itself. And then finally, and this is a general rule of thumb, but you may want to consider, this individual may want to consider withdrawing from their IRA and their Roth IRA equally upon depleting their non-retirement investment account. I guess when I say equally, I mean proportionately. And the reason this is ideal, or maybe ideal, is to help to lower taxes. Essentially, the IRA is fully taxable as earned income, and the Roth IRA has no tax consequences. Because of that, you can lower your marginal tax rate by withdrawing from both at the same time, ultimately reducing the total amount of taxes paid from the IRAs. It's just a rule of thumb, but it's a lot of times people don't put a lot of thought into what to draw from first. And lastly, the worst thing that you can do is to withdraw from an investment account during a significant market downturn. Everyone knows that, but sometimes you have to. So what I recommend when a plan calls for it is to potentially, and this is best to talk to an advisor about, but to potentially borrow from your money via a line of credit while your accounts are down in value. That way, you're not permanently reducing the account's value by withdrawing, but you will lose some money to interest from the line of credit loan. But once the market recovers, then you can distribute from your accounts, once they've reached back to their previous values, and you just use your investments to pay down the line. Once again, though, these are general rule of thumbs. Everyone's situation is different, so everyone's plan is going to be different. But this is just one example. So what isn't necessarily unique, and like I said, this is unique to everyone, but what isn't necessarily unique are some of the major pitfalls that I see when planning for retirement. So I think what would be best is to discuss that now and to get into some of the specifics so you're aware as a financial advisor what I see, as well as some of the strategies to help overcome. And what I've done is I boiled it down to the top four that I see. And hopefully, by shedding some light on these issues, you may avoid making some of the mistakes that really happen to everyone. And the biggest blunder that I see is people, a lot of times, especially with retirement planning, they just fail to plan for tax. And I showed the detailed chart earlier, but what I want to specifically discuss are these four retirement assets as they are the most common people use to fund retirements. First off, Social Security, as I mentioned, isn't 100% taxable. Up to 85% of it may be subject to tax. But for those that have little to no additional income in retirement, it may not even be taxable at all. Additionally, not every state is going to tax Social Security. For example, my home state of California doesn't tax it. There are only 11 states that do, actually. Secondly, pre-tax retirement accounts, for example, your IRA, your 401k, excuse me, these are 100% taxable as earned income. The only time you ever will pay tax from these accounts, though, is when you withdraw. So at that point, when you take a distribution, you will be subject to income tax. Non-retirement investment accounts are taxed in numerous ways. You should be aware of all these. First and foremost, you do pay capital gains tax on any gain when you sell a security at a profit. So if you've held for over a year, or if you've held a position for over a year, you're going to pay long-term capital gains taxes, which are either 0, 15%, or 20% federally. It's going to be based off of your adjusted gross income. State taxes will vary by state to state for long-term capital long-term capital gains. For example, my state of California, it taxes based off your income tax bracket. The state in which I grew up in, Ohio, they have a tiered tax just like federal has. Now, if you've held an investment for under 1 year, though, you're going to pay short-term capital gains. And from a federal perspective, that's just whatever income tax bracket you're in. And most likely from a state, it's going to be whatever income tax bracket you're in as well. Additionally, any interest or dividends will also be taxed as ordinary income. And lastly, non-retirement life annuities, what we mentioned earlier, are taxed based off of what's called the exclusion ratio. Essentially, what this is part of the income stream will not be taxable because it's what's considered your cost basis. That's what you put into the investment. But then the growth will be taxable as ordinary income. And there's a weird calculation that is applied when you take a distribution to determine what is not taxable and what is taxable. So in building a plan, be certain you're accounting for the correct tax liability. Now, moving on to the next slide, which everyone should be thinking about right now, is planning for inflation. Inflation eats away at the buying power of your portfolio. And if you do not properly plan for it, you may be dramatically underestimating your future expenses. A normal retirement may last around 20 to 25 years. So with a conservative inflation rate of, let's call it 3%, it would cost you over double in 25 years to purchase the same goods that it costs you to purchase now. Is this surprising? Well, probably not given the inflationary environment we're in now. And if you're watching this as a recording in years to come, this is in 2023 when inflation was pretty high. However, it is very normal that people plan to fail or fail to plan for inflation. As I showed earlier, the only retirement assets that's going to have a cost of living adjustment that's really guaranteed is Social Security. And for most, that's just not enough money to live off of. Another issue I see is that people fail to diversify their investment portfolio in retirement. And studies have proven through Monte Carlo simulations that a well-diversified portfolio has a higher likelihood of kind of making it through retirement than a less diversified portfolio. There's a lot of study and complexity that goes into this, but generally speaking, diversification can help reduce the volatility of a portfolio, and a portfolio with less volatility has less sequence of returns risk. But before getting into the diagram, it's important to understand that the way you manage your investments during the accumulation phase of life is and probably should be different than the way that you manage them during the distribution phase. Volatility, as I just mentioned, it does not necessarily affect you as much while you're just accumulating your portfolio, putting money into your portfolio. So long as you stay invested and you don't try to time the market, volatility smooths out. Volatility in retirement, however, can be extremely devastating due to what I talked about earlier, the sequence of returns risk. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because I could talk about it for probably an hour, but summarized, your sequence of returns risk decreases by having more diversification in your portfolio. And this is shown by this graph here by looking at oh yeah, on the right side, excuse me. It's shown by looking at the 40% equity, 60% bond portfolio. The gray line is a 40%, 60% portfolio of the US economy and the aggregate bond index. The purple line is the same 60%, 40% portfolio, but instead it's diversified, investing in varied bond and varied stock indices. For example, international equity, emerging markets equities, small cap, high yield, and so on. And what this graph shows is that the more diversification, the more diversified portfolio manages to last longer in retirement, ultimately just because it has less volatility. I can just say with confidence that proper diversification is key to building out that efficient portfolio for retirement longevity. So really put some thought into your distribution, your portfolio planning. And then lastly, one of the largest retirement distribution pitfalls is unexpected long-term care costs. Long-term care costs typically arise as you are nearing the end of your life and are drastically different than healthcare costs, which usually are covered by Medicare. Now, long-term care is the assistance with performing the daily activities of living, and paid care typically involves at-home care, nursing homes, or assisted living facilities. Now, these care facilities can be extremely expensive, and the costs are really only on the rise. For example, the average cost of a nursing home or assisted living facility is around $125,000 a year in California, and that can vary dramatically by location and also the services provided. Those costs are typically out of pocket, and as you can see by the charts on the lower half of the screen, they do have the ability to last many years. My grandma, for example, was in a care facility for an extended period of time, so I understand kind of where these costs can affect a family. So what you need to know is that this can be extremely detrimental to your retirement distribution plan for a few reasons. First off, it's an unexpected high expense that will take a toll on your portfolio. Secondly, these costs are not a tax write-off. So let's just say you needed $100,000 for care. That may result in a $140,000 distribution from your retirement account to pay for the tax. And lastly, if you're not married and you are the first of two to need care, then your household portfolio is potentially going to be depleted a lot quicker than expected, resulting in the healthy spouse having less money available for themselves, and they may end up in an unfortunate financial situation for the remainder of their retirement. There are plenty of ways to plan for unexpected long-term care expenses, though. But what I recommend is that you just have some plan in place and are aware of the risks. So that leads me to the final section, which is building a plan for yourself. And like I've mentioned a few times now, everyone's situation is different, so everyone's plan is going to be different. But all plans are built following these 5 simple steps. First, review your goals and review your objectives. Second, get organized. Review your balance sheet, determine what assets you have, what you don't, and analyze your true net worth. For example, if you have a home worth $1 million that isn't paid off and an IRA worth $1 million, you don't really have $2 million. Your IRA account hasn't been taxed, and equity in your home is whatever your loan balance is subtracted from the value of the home. So it might be much less than you see when you log into your aggregation financial portal. Third, review your expenses in detail. Line item the expenses that will change as you age into retirement. You do need to have a realistic idea of how much your expenses are today so that you can project those expenses outward. And always use conservative assumptions and also account for inflation. This is extremely important when projecting because once you see how much you're actually going to be spending, along with what assets you have, you can then start to coordinate everything together, as I mentioned in the previous slides, to ensure that you're planning for the future. Project Social Security, project that annuity income, project your required minimum distributions, project your pensions, your expenses, everything that can be project. And then lastly, ensure that you're consistently reviewing and adjusting. No plan is perfect, so make sure you're adjusting it as needed, as well as double checking that the assumptions in the plan were originally accurate. And to show you what a simplified distribution model may look like, here's an example. First, ensure you properly listed out that balance sheet. This will help you get organized and aware of exactly what you own and how it plays into your planning. Next, upon reviewing expenses and various cash flow projections like Social Security, begin to project outward. This type of planning, while not glamorous, is what provides retirement confidence, knowing that you're really doing what's best for you and your family. And this is the exact type of planning we do for our clients. So, with that being said, thank you very much for joining. Clients on the line, reach out if you have questions. We are more than happy to rerun your plan, adjust your plan, show you hypotheticals, or just do a quick check-in review. So while these webinars may be educational, just know we're always available for you. And for those that aren't clients, if you want to talk, just reach out to us. My contact information is on the screen. You can go to our website to learn more about us, but do not hesitate to contact us. And what I'm going to do now is open it up to questions. But for those watching the recording, I do have to end it. So thanks for joining. And for those that have questions, just hang tight for 1 minute. Thanks.